Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I am Fahima Mohammed, your host and relationship coach. And tonight we have another topic and episode for you, discussing relationships in the new age. Now, this is something very interesting as we are all finding it quite a struggle and a challenge as to what's happening in today. So we're going to discuss that. If you have any of your questions and queries, then it would be absolutely amazing to hear you wherever you're streaming, whether it's live on Sky Channel 752, Facebook or Twitter. We welcome all of you here from British Muslim TV. The team is waiting to take your calls. And if you want to dial in, you can dial in on 01924231083 live at the studio, where I will be posting your questions to our guest tonight. But do ask the bill payer's permission, as standard network rates do apply. If you want to message me anonymously, and you can do so for free, you can try even our free WhatsApp service, and that number is 07585835150. The numbers are going to be remaining for the rest of the episode. Make sure that you do call in and send in your questions for my guest tonight, who is Faisal Sheikh Chan. Assalamu alaikum.
How are you? Thank you
Very
for having
well,
me
thank
today.
you. Thank you for joining me. I know how busy everybody that comes on the show, and especially people like yourselves who are professionals or are working. I really do appreciate your time. And inshallah, we look forward to the discussion. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Faisal.
I'm a bit of I like to say that I'm a multi-potentialite. That's a new term that they use nowadays. Originally, I'm a teacher. And through that, I've been talking to students, when teens are growing up, and they tend to get more inquisitive about relationships. Things happen, they have heartbreaks. And up from that, I started creating content. A bit later in my life, I started creating content about relationships. And this is it. This is what I do. So I'm a part-time tutor and a part-time content creator as well.
That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I like to say that I'm a tutor by day, creator by night.
Well, whatever works. To be honest, this kind of conversation, this topic, relationships in the new age. Now, what does that even mean to you, especially? Because yes, we're talking about new age. Are we talking 10 years, difference? Are we talking like generation from our parents? Now, when you listen to this title and topic, are you talking about comparing today in the last 10 years or a generation?
I would say not exactly generation, not exactly 10 years, but it's mostly distinguishable. Relationships are mostly distinguishable between before the internet, before the massive spread of internet around 2012, like when there was the big boom of Facebook, and before that. So before internet, my analysis is that relationships have been different. But after internet, gradually they've evolved. And with social media nowadays, this is a big topic in itself that I've seen many times on the internet. With social media, you can actually see the progression. If you go through YouTube and see how history shows the evolution of relationships, you'll see a massive difference. The single thing that I like to quote is divorce rate, which is something that's more prevalent in this new age that I call new age compared to before, like pre-internet. And many studies have been done on that as well, where people have said, oh yeah, nowadays relationships are different. The factors affecting relationship are different, or the factors you use to weigh a relationship are different nowadays. Whereas before, there were a little bit less factors or different factors. This is something to be discussed.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that because I mean, there are different factors, and we're going to go into the negatives. But do you not think that even the internet has actually opened up for people to meet people that they wouldn't normally meet because it is so much wider, and also for people that may be shy to be face to face and to actually approach someone, so that now they can actually, talk to someone online when they don't have to have that sort of pressure. What's your thoughts on that?
Totally agree. Totally agree. There are many, when I tell my friends, I tell them there are many good things about the internet. It's just like anything, any invention that you think about. There are good things to them if you use them properly. There are bad things to them. You cannot escape it. So for example, if I take the example of a car, it's been designed for transportation, but unfortunately accidents happen. It's the same thing for the internet. Maybe it's been created with a proper thought, like positive thought behind it. But unfortunately,
how would you use it in a correct way? Because a lot of us do blame social media, but I want to know exactly, what to pinpoint that is wrong and that is right, so that people who are now navigating through it, because that is the majority of people nowadays, it is so widely used, and it's not just in the Western society, it's in the Muslim community where people are meeting online, whether they admit it or not. So we need to sort of see as to what's going on, as to what is the good things about it and what is the bad things. So let's talk about those factors, and how would you sort of like address it, and sort of like determine what is it that's good and bad.
So I would take the example of a friend, a recent friend that I've made, thanks to the internet, thanks to Instagram. So because before I'm quite articulate, as my lecturer would say, when I was in uni, we were called to make videos, and those videos were posted on the internet. And one of the good friends that I made was through those videos which were published on the internet. So I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. That's a really great thing, because the person is a really great friend to me. And also, like you said, people who are shy to go out there, somehow they manage to send a message to someone and it connects. But we cannot deny that sometimes it doesn't connect with the person that you want. It's just the rule of nature. And it's a rule of probability that's prevailing. But anyway, it works. We cannot deny it. It works. People meet through the internet. The last thing I've been through was an award ceremony. That was something I discovered through LinkedIn, and I saw that it was happening. And I pinged someone and I said, "Oh, can I pop in?" The person said yes. So there are many great factors about the internet. If you want another level to that, so if I'm having a problem in my relationship, the first thing I do, which is funny enough, I Google.
Right.
It seems that, no, I'm still here. I Google the things that, maybe the symptoms, the problems that I'm having in my relationship. And then I read and I see what's going on. And I get little cues and I read about it. I'm like, oh, that's how I can be better in my relationship. So there are many positives to it. Now, for the negatives, it depends on the person. It depends on the the way they want to use it. And nowadays with the news, we see how people sometimes, many times, stalk people on the internet, send threats and different kinds of negatives, which everyone knows what can happen using the internet. Even you can cast a, how do you say that? Like point.
Well, when you were mentioning actually that if you had a problem, you would go on Google. I thought you were going to say, when I have a problem in my relationship, I'd go on Google and find somebody else or look at somebody else, because that is also the other issue, right? We have to be honest about that. There is actually the probability that they're not going to work on their own relationship because they're going to look for something else.
Yeah, that is another. This is what I say to people, which is funny enough. People say that when one door closes, when someone goes away, there's actually 10 waiting for you, which is not actually true, which people tend to say that. But if you do the triage properly, you have to take into account culture, habits, eating habits, location. When you do all of that, you don't have that much of options, but you do. We can't deny that you do. And many people nowadays, instead of solving the problem that they have in their relationship, which is something that you need to do on a daily basis in a relationship, you have to solve problems. Instead of doing that, they search for options. Or it's not worse, but another thing that people tend to do is when they're having a problem with their partners, what they tend to do is go and DM someone else and try to find out, oh, my partner did that to me. Is he a good person or a bad person? And the third party reading this message, being a friend of that person, of course, is going to take side with the person sending the message. They're not going to take sides with the partner but they don't know the full story. That's where things go wrong. When people send message, oh, my partner did this to me, is he a bad person? The friend would be like, oh yeah, you definitely need to leave him. Like, come on. You don't know you don't know everything about the relationship. You don't know the ins and outs. You don't know what happens every day. You cannot really advise someone to stay or leave a relationship based on a single message that you got from the person when they were in a problem. So this is something that I find with many people when they have a problem with their partner. They tend to send a message and then somehow the friend tend to wind the person against the partner, which I think is totally wrong. And I believe people need to start with themselves first. They need to try to solve their problem within
well, you
the
raise a very important point, actually, and we are going to come back to that because we are heading into a break. Because now we've obviously touched on, issues of, social media being an issue, but now you actually gone on to the second phase of how people's interference in this new age, and they all seem to have an idea of how to give advice on relationships. So we're definitely going to come back and discuss that a lot more deeper. Make sure whoever's watching, please do stay with us, stay tuned. It's very interesting that we're having this conversation, and inshallah, we will see you in a few moments. Take care, and we'll see you shortly. Salam. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We are discussing relationships in the new age. What does that mean? Well, our guest Faisal has been discussing how it's so a distraction when we have social media, and we always talk about that a lot, but I think there's a lot more to it than just that. We also have to be accountable and take responsibility for ourselves and what else is around. Now, before the break, we touched on the fact that we do tend to rely on friendships or people around us and discussing our own relationships quite openly and getting advice from not necessarily the people that actually are going to give you the best sort of guidance in your interest. They're going to obviously, especially if it's a friend, a family member, most likely they're not going to challenge you or counter you, and they're probably just going to take your side, and they might even, make you go even more spiraling down in that relationship. Now, Faisal, what was your reason to say that? Have you actually had experience about this? Because, you say you create content. What gives you the ideas to create content? What is out there that you are seeing that's making you create this kind of content and sharing with people, the kind of, sort of topics or issues that you raise? What's happening in the world today, this generation?
I should have said that during my introduction. I've been passionate about understanding this thing called relationships since I was 18, because it's something which is very complex, and I always wanted to learn and understand, what's happening, how does this work? Is there a fixed number of elements involved in a relationship, or is it something more complex than it is? So I started reading books about it. And also we had I would not say weekly, let's say monthly chats with group of friends trying to understand what goes on. And we had a saying, which we were saying that if men conversed with each other like women do, we'd be better at relationships, because women talk more about their relationships than men do, isn't it?
That's so true. That's absolutely true. What do you guys talk about then?
We try to understand, because it just seemed to us that back then, like I'm talking easily 15 years ago, we already understood that women are more versed socially than guys. It's just that it's like they come pre-equipped with that skill, but it's not pre-equipped. It's because girls tend to be approached really early on in life by people, many people, maybe on the road, get catcalled and all of those things.
Right.
So they have to develop skills to be able to get away from situations or to get out of tricky situations, all of that. So that cultivates their social ability, if I can say. So us guys, we were like, we felt left behind. So we tried to understand how to be better with people, and also how to be better with girls in general, because we were young. So that was the aim of our discussion. But me personally, it stayed like an intrigue section of life. So I always pursued that kind of research, ongoing and ongoing. I stayed in touch with how it evolved with time, and I saw how it evolved with time. And
I think what you raised was so important there, actually, which I never really thought about before, because it's not just the fact that women are just, innately going to talk. I guess they're forced in certain situations, like you mentioned, because they are approached a lot more than men are. So they have to be put in there. And I think that's a very great point that we need to obviously highlight. And that's something that's not just for the new age, that's also from before. But obviously the new age is allowing it much more on the internet, because maybe even girls, some, especially in the Muslim community, they may be a little bit more shy to approach in that way as men do. Men get a lot more rejection. So I guess you got to have a lot of thick skin as well, right? So, I mean, you said you've been, pursuing this kind of understanding of relationships. So what have you found, which is quite profound, that has changed over, say, for the last few years?
This falls under only one category that I found really important, and nowadays it's taught like a soft skill, which is, they call it EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, which is something, it was being talked about for the last 5 years, and then recently is just like dissolved in the background. But people are still using, I would say, key elements of that study, if you want. They still apply many things related to emotional intelligence, be it in a relationship, be it at work, whatever, wherever you're dealing with people, they use those techniques that people have when they have great emotional intelligence. So
can you describe to the viewers, what do you mean by emotional intelligence? Maybe not everyone understand, what does that actually mean?
So emotional intelligence compared to intellectual IQ. Intellectual IQ is related to mostly academics, mathematics, arts. It's divided into those categories. Emotional intelligence, like the word says it, emotions, is mostly about understanding your emotion and regulating them in situations, whatever situation might be with another human. So if you want to divide it further, you have compassion, compassion, anger, frustration, happiness, all of those emotions. You learn what triggers them, or if they get excessive, how to regulate them. Especially when I learned about emotional intelligence, it was mostly for two places, relationships and workplace. And in those two situations, you have a lot of these waves of emotion that you get in a day, that you have to understand how to address them, especially the negative emotions. So if you get rejected, you need to know how to approach that emotion, how to acknowledge it, and then work around that, trying to channel that in a proper way to not destroy yourself, use it positively, and all of that. So
there is the theory that you're describing, but do you not feel that men and women actually need to converse to understand each other? And that's very difficult, especially in our culture, in our religion, in our faith, because you can learn it, but unless you actually experience it, then you know how to actually respond or how to understand your triggers. What is your sort of like, understanding about knowing emotional intelligence without actually even being in a relationship?
many people, from what I've seen, many people don't actually bother to go in that area and study that, which is something I totally understand. But many people with time, and especially with hurdles of life, and when you're hit with, I don't know, rejection, heartbreak, pain, grief, and all of that, as a human who wants to thrive, who wants to be a problem solver, who wants to like become better and not let emotions get the best of you, you learn to find ways to regulate it without actually knowing that you are working your emotional intelligence. So many people, from my observation, they work on their EQ without knowing that they're working on their EQ. And naturally, what happens with people who've been in relationships, who have been through heartbreak, who've been through grief, they, with time, develop better EQ without knowing that they're developing better EQ.
Do you think men and women develop it differently, or do they need different types of emotional intelligence, or what is it if it is different?
Definitely, we develop that differently. Women tend to, like, if you take it from layman terms, women mature earlier than men, which is actually, we're talking about emotional intelligence. They get those soft skills way earlier in life because of the reason that I said before. And men with, which is not actually the greatest thing, but it is the truth. Men with pain, loss, grief, heartbreaks, men develop those skills when they go through these hurdles, when they overcome these hurdles.
But do you not think, okay, a lot of people might say that dating is a lot harder now, but regardless, we've got a lot more technology in order to get information. We have much more psychological sort of analysis. Like you said, you can just Google what is it that you need to do in a particular way. So that should really help relationships thrive more than just, more than just struggle. So, it's quite, sort of like, it's just strange in that sense, right? Wouldn't you say?
I'll give you a comparison. I was thinking about this issue recently. So if you go back in the days when you had to get an appointment with a GP, it used to be a kind of straightaway process. Nowadays, with all the technology which is supposed to facilitate the process, it takes way longer for you to get an appointment, to go through all these barriers before you reach that end point. And this
Good analogy. Good analogy.
Allow me to add another thing to that. If you apply for a job, goodness me, the number of barriers that you have before reaching the job is actually a job in itself. So it seems that technology, with the good intention of facilitating our life, now we're seeing that it has not done it properly. And I think we have a long way to go to like make it become better. And it's the same for relationships. Back in the days, you used to play outside, go outside, and then if you hit your luck, you meet someone and things would just happen. So for example, if I take our community, you'd go to weddings and you see people and then you try to talk to an auntie, oh, who's that girl? Blah, blah, blah. And then connections happen. You didn't even know about options. But nowadays, you don't do that in weddings. You just sit there in your corner on your phone and hope that you'll find that person on Tinder or Minder.
That is so true. Oh my gosh. That is the reality. Oh my gosh. This topic is actually a lot more than I expected.
And the funny thing is that if you think about it, with the new algorithms nowadays, they map your location. And you can actually see the person quickly. What happened is that if you're two people are in the same location and you're posting stories, both people are posting stories on Instagram, and somehow you have mutual friends, it would be easier to have them in your friend suggestion.
Yes, of course. Everything's connected. Everything and everyone is connected.
But the funny thing is that despite all those facilities, you would not be able to meet the person.
Wow. You know, we are coming into another break, and honestly, it's really amazing actually how you spoke about that, and it's kind of, you know, given us much more to sort of go to the next stage of our episode. But we are coming into a break. We will see you in a few moments. Catch you on the other side. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. Having a very, very interesting conversation. And Basil, you mentioned quite a few times actually that you discuss relationships with your friends. I'm assuming these are men that you're discussing it with. Now, I want to pry a little bit. Tell me, what do men talk about when they're actually addressing the topic of relationships? We know women talk about it a lot, right? Even if we don't like the guy, have a problem, or we are, you know, over the moon, it's very open. Now, I want to know, what are those conversations? I'm not going to, obviously, you're not going to mention your friends' names, but they're going to know that you're talking about it. But yeah. I'm sorry, I want to know. And I'm sure a lot of women out there want to know, what do men talk about?
Guys are just different. It's just like a funny wave of conversation. So let's say four people are meeting and their main interest is football. That's where it starts. It starts around that, and then especially when you're young, so you start talking about football, then you're like, oh, who did you meet today? Let's say something like that. Oh, did you meet a new girl today? Or let me give a context. Let's say four people who love football, they all go to a wedding and they're all single. So whenever they're going to sit within the wedding and start talking, it's going to maybe start about, oh, the wedding is nice, the setting, blah, 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 the food, not to forget the food. And then they're going to start saying, oh, did you see that one? So it starts, oh, yeah. Then they start judging a little bit. Oh, no, not that one. So that's peer pressure coming to you. Oh, you didn't choose the right one, or you choose the right ones. Or you'll tell the other one, oh, don't look at that one. That's mine. That's your sister-in-law.
Okay, so these conversations are actually happening, and it is real. So they do actually. So it's mainly about, I would say, for men, majority of the time is physical attraction as well, because that is another question.
It starts there. And men, like, if you take it further, this is for single guys. If you take it further, the men I've encountered, at least, they don't discuss the core of their relationship. So what's happening, what's the problem, and blah, blah, because there's mainly an ego thing going on. What if the other guy's got it better? What if he's doing better in his relationship? Then I'll appear as if I'm dumb, you know? And guys don't want to feel like that, so they don't talk about it. And even if a guy is having a problem, if you go to a relationship counsel, you won't go to a guy, you'll go to a lady. In order not
interesting. Really? Okay, I'm so interested in that, in you saying that. And what would be the reason for that?
Just not to be judged. Oh, wow. Because you know a guy would judge. You know, professionally, the person is not supposed to, but still you have that little thing, oh, nah, not a guy. And also, there's another factor.
It's so interesting you say that, because I do coach men and a lot of women don't coach men. So it just goes to show that it is required by men to be coached by women, right?
By women within that area. Because remember, we were talking before how women are more like emotionally savvy than men.
Yes,
and it's just something that comes naturally, biologically, if you want. You know that. So if you take it from the start, as a kid, as a toddler, you've got a problem, you don't go to your dad. You go to your mom. As a man, you go to your mom. Like, mom, this happened. have this problem. It's just the natural way that it is. This is my belief. And when you have a problem in a relationship, if you want to go to a relationship counsel, you go to a lady and you're like, oh, I'm going to have a different, better point of view emotionally to be able to guide me how to channel my emotions, how to better behave maybe in the relationship, how to be better. Because as a man in a relationship, there's so many things that you have to take, which is something that you don't experience when you're single. Because men are so out of touch with their emotions when they're single. It's all about playing.
Do you think that you go to a female relationship coach or counselor to understand a female, or also to actually not have another man judge you? Which one is it? Is it one or both?
Both. Definitely both. Definitely both. Because at some point, you know, the age-old thing that we say, men are more logical, women more emotional, and we try to make things into a structure,
yes,
which is not the same thing for ladies. They are just different. It's just how we are biologically. So in the hope of understanding how to address things in a relationship, how to better approach things, how to not make your partner like annoyed at you most of the time, things like that. So you try to understand, oh, my approach was not good. Maybe if I try to meet them in the middle, then it would be better.
Do you know, I love this conversation because you're being so open and honest, especially as a man, to share what a man thinks. And we don't get that. We only get the theories and we get the professionals, and that's great. But you're giving me raw detail, which I love. And you're telling me your friend's conversation. Hopefully they're not going to call you out on that. But anyways, I think this is really, really interesting. And, you know, women need to hear this. It's quite tough. Now, the other thing I think I want to always really ask, you know, a man, and I know you don't represent everyone, but it's good to have a perspective. And you obviously have some sort of, you know, population, which you might be, you know, sort of like similar sort of mindset. When it comes to finance, now there's a lot of women's roles that have changed, and they're independent, they're strong, they're empowered. Now, this is the new age, right? Even the roles at home has changed, where men have to probably do a little bit more or a little bit less, depending on that. What is your thoughts, and what's the conversation with men when it comes to strong women? Do they find it intimidating, or do they think, no, it should be equal now? What is going on in your head?
I always tend to take that way to the past, to the era of our last prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the first lady that he got married to was a business person. So to start with, the person Khadija was a businesswoman, was already more successful than him. He was working under her, if you can say. That's the first thing. So women having a business, working, personally, that thing should be aside. And then the roles of the two people in the house, if you read from scripts, has always been that men should be helping their lady in the house. It just happened that through time, ladies were more like in the kitchen back in the days, in the old days, because men had to go out and work all the time. And when they come home, they were tired. And it happens that ladies were cooking and taking care of the house. But I still do believe that women play a very, very key role in maintaining the home, not the house, the home. Because the home atmosphere is around the women. They nurture. And if the atmosphere is good, the women will nurture properly. But if the atmosphere is not good, like the man is not behaving in a way that's required, I would say, it just happens to, it just goes a little bit sour. And I don't believe that the roles have changed. I say this from an observation that I made like 10 years ago. So I have a friend who still is a lawyer, very well off in her life. And I asked her, how do you maintain your marriage? Because you're a very successful woman. And don't you find that you like overpower your men? And the answer was very simple, which I really like. Of course, she doesn't represent all the women, but I would like people to hear this because I really like her answer. It was like, I leave my job at my job. I don't do my job at home. I don't do the lawyer with my husband. I am the female. He is the male energy in the house. It's just how it is. And nowadays, I'm guilty of that as well. Because I've got teacher vibes, I bring that in the house because is just merged into my personality nowadays. And my constant struggle is to separate that, which is good. I believe is very good because you have to separate your male persona, which you have to present at home, male persona, father persona, husband persona that you have to present at home from your job one. And the same thing goes for the woman.
I think that's very, very profound. And I think that also highlights how at the end of the day, things are set in different sort of roles and energy, feminine and masculine energy as well. And independent women does not mean that, you know, it's like that, but it also arises with questions that, you know, people need to know how to navigate those, like you mentioned. But even though you talk about our faith and it's very clear as to what it is, and even as you mentioned, the male ego, not even talking about relationships to a professional that is male and you'd want to go to a woman, don't you think it's kind of similar as well, knowing that you're a man and your wife is earning more than you and has much more financial sort of ability than you? And again, it does dent the ego of a man majority of the time, and they actually do find it very difficult. And it's nothing to do with faith, it's to do with the culture and society that we're living in and man's ego. So that is a problem now, and we're finding that more women also feel that men can marry below and across, but women want to marry above, but men are naturally now not necessarily above the women financially a lot of the times.
Yeah, it just happens that society has evolved in that way. And what I find useful is if the lady is earning better than the men. I've witnessed this happening with a couple that I know. What this did to the husband, which I really liked, and I really tried to think about that many times. If I was in a situation like that, I would take that as motivation to become better. So if there is an ego, not if there is an ego involved in that situation when your lady is earning more than you. It just happens that it's that way. So I would say to men, use that as motivation to get better, to do better. And of course, when you get better earnings than your lady, she'll be happy. She'll be more than happy that you're earning good money.
That is if she accepts him in the first place, because a lot of the times they don't even accept them when they are, you know, in that standard. But we are going to come back to that because we are going into another break. I think this conversation is so interesting. You sharing all your friends' stories, and I hope they appreciate it because we certainly do tonight. But no names, everything's anonymous. No, but honestly, it's a serious conversation. Times have definitely changed. We are definitely evolving. And inshallah, we will be back in a few moments where we're going to be continuing this conversation in our final segment. So don't go away because it's getting really, really juicy. And I didn't expect it to be like this, but it's absolutely amazing with my guest tonight. So I will see you shortly in a few moments. Inshallah, take care. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. Again, such an interesting conversation. Faisal, all your friends must be thinking, wow, you're telling them my story. We were talking in the break, you know, honestly, it's great to have theory, but it's lovely to share people's stories and learn from other people's experiences. I think it's so valuable because a lot of people do resonate with it. And again, everything is private and confidential. We are not naming anyone here, but we're just sharing stories, which is probably here. Probably hundreds of people feel that it's their story. Now, before the break, we were talking about how it is that, men and women differ in finance and how it actually makes a difference to a man's ego, and also looking at new relationships. Women are not necessarily accepting of that. You said that it should motivate a man, but that's okay if she's already chosen him, but they're not even choosing men now because they don't want that. They're actually finding it very difficult to choose men who are earning less, for example, or not even educated. And women are much highly educated and earning and having a lot more of the profession. Do you think that is actually damaging to relationships today? What is your personal thought? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer, but I want to know what you think.
I've been observing that since a long time. I've been seeing the evolution as well, how few women were choosing men on the path to their growth. And now it's fewer women choosing men in the path of their growth. So it's gotten worse from my observation. But I believe it's going to reach like a turning point where women are going to understand that, but there's all of the men at some point in their life are in their growing phase. And maybe they need to try and see that, like, be able to see the men when they are in that growth phase. Because if you think about men in their late 20s, that's when most of the growth happens. And many men don't have it figured out in their 30s. So that's the reality that women should know, instead of actually not choosing men who are not earning as much as they want. Now, there's another factor to that. It's not only about finance. Yes, maybe the person is only earning average, but it's how do they care for you? Is it only about money? If they're earning a lot of money, will they have time for you? How are they with kids? How are they in the house? How caring are they towards their house or their home, should I say? Those are factors to be considered. It doesn't start only with money. And like we know in Islam, it says, look at the deen first. And if you have the deen, you will have values that you adhere to. So yes, you need to provide for the house, even if you're making average and maybe your lady is earning more than you. But ladies as well should know that the men should possess other values rather than only having financial stability. He should be able to care. He should be able to father. He should be able to joke. Very important. He should not be a bore. You could be earning a lot of money, but you're just sitting there all day and not knowing how to make a conversation. All of that is very important. Like people say, beauty fades. But if you've got a good character and you can joke about things, that's what keeps you moving.
No, absolutely. I think you raised some really, really important points there around that, because a lot of women, young people nowadays, especially, when they're looking in this day and age, it is very superficial. It is very surface. And there's a lot more qualities that is required for both men and women to look deeper and to the core, and mentioning values and emotional intelligence and the whole character of somebody is highly important. Now, do you find that in today's day and age, compared to before, women are a lot more vocal? So we talk a lot about communication. We definitely can communicate, so we don't have that problem. It's just how. Do you think that's changed? Because, women used to be quiet. They used to put up. And on one hand, it's good that they don't put up with certain things that they shouldn't put up with anymore, right? Like abuse or, some sort of ill treatment. But on the other hand, just on a normal basis, forgetting the extreme, they are actually saying what they want and what they don't want. And they're also not tolerating a lot of nonsense as well. So how do you see the new generation with communication?
I have a spicy response to that. Probably many people won't accept my point of view, but it is just how it is. So nowadays I'm actually totally happy that women are vocal. They say what they need to say in situations they need to voice out what's going on. But then it has grown into something which is not totally for the best interest of both sexes. It's grown into something where society nowadays tend to give more value to what a woman says than to what a man says. And on top of that, to add another layer to that, if you somehow try to disagree with the woman's point of view, you are banned or qualified as whatever negative adjective you want to give to the person, which I think is totally bad. Because if you think about the purpose of free speech, both parties should be able to express their views and to openly disagree. But nowadays, it seems that the disagreement with women, I wouldn't say in general, but tends to be that, oh, if someone disagrees with the woman's point of view, he's wrong. But what about taking it as a human point of view? Both of their sexes can be wrong, and both of them should be able to accept when they are wrong. But for me personally, I don't find it fair that it's going that way, where mostly women's point of view are taken into consideration and men's voice are just silenced. And I think it's something that many people have seen nowadays, but they've tried to question as well or fight, but they've been silenced.
I know what you mean when you say that, actually, because I guess we have this word is toxic masculinity, and it's kind of like damaging. And now there's not even any masculinity in most men because they're scared to speak up, and they also get abused. They also are treated unfairly. I completely understand where you're coming from. And just because, yes, predominantly women are the ones that are mainly abused, and they have been in the past and still continue to, unfortunately, but that does still not, erase the whole fact that, when there is a genuine case, it should be heard fairly. That's what you're saying, right?
I'll tell you something very, very simple about it. That's where my point of view stems from. So if there is a deep-rooted problem in a relationship, the lady, most of the time, what they do, they talk about it. They cry. They have a friend, they have a sister, they have a mother to talk about it. I think my webcam went off. Bear with me.
Yes, well, as we are explaining this, I think it's such an interesting topic with regards to what is happening today and the roles of change between genders. And it's not just in normal society, it is actually also a lot in the Muslim community. Are you there with me?
I'm here back.
Okay, go ahead. Go with your point.
So I was saying, when women have a problem, when there is a deep-rooted problem in a relationship, women tend to speak to people, whereas men, they stay silent. They don't speak about it and tend to internalize it. And many times what happens, I'm taking that to an extreme, but it does happen. Men get suicidal. Whereas for women, it's just a different way of coping.
Yes.
For men, it just gets like too much to take if the relationship is not going well, if the home is not well taken care of. So this is a major difference.
They bottle it up, is that what you're saying? And they try and deal with it in that way. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think this is such an interesting conversation, and it's really crucial because at the end of the day, it's highlighting not just the issues, but the things that needs improvement. So what does need improving in this new age? Because like you said, there's still a lot of good factors, but what would you like to see in the improvement, and give some sort of tips with regards to a successful relationship in the new age?
I would say something very simple, very, very simple. If you look at the fashion nowadays, it's mostly large pants at the bottom, which are coming back into fashion, which tells me that people are looking back to what people were doing in the 70s, to take example from there and to try to mimic the same thing with a little touch of innovation. And I believe the same approach should be for relationships. Take a look at what was working before, how people were solving problems, how discussions were happening. And if the problem is really bad, there was a family reunion, a meeting to be able to solve the deep-rooted problem in that relationship. And it didn't go out of the house. It stayed within the family. It didn't go out on the internet. This is a good example to take from the previous age, like before internet.
Absolutely. Faisal, we've only got last couple of minutes of the show. Can you believe it? But I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear more of your content. Can you share with me, where can people reach you, especially if they want to listen to you?
The main place is TikTok and Instagram. So if people want to see more of these kinds of content, it's on TikTok that they can find me. And they would hear the same kind of point of views. I give them tips about relationships from experience, from what I read, and from what I've seen other relationship coaches say. And I take that and frame it to give tips to people.
I love that. You've been absolutely gem tonight, and you've given us so much food for thought. And I love the fact that you've been so raw and honest and giving us all your friends' gossip as well. No, I love the insight, especially going into a man's mind. I think it's really important. You know what? I just want to say thank you so much for being with us tonight, Faisal. Is there anything else you want to say in the last few seconds that we've got left?
No, absolutely not. It's been a lovely conversation. Obviously, it's something so wide, a topic to explore. And I know we didn't explore all of it because it's impossible to do that in 1 hour. There's
absolutely, but we will definitely have most of our guests, inshallah, you know, following you on Instagram and TikTok, and make sure you do that. Again, one more time, I want to say from all of us here on British Muslim TV, thank you so much to my lovely guest, Faisal. I also want to say thank you so much for the viewers who are watching, who are commenting, who are always engaging, who are also giving us ideas every week. We only raise these kind of issues because we know that you require the sort of growth, the development, the insight, information, learning, and education, inshallah, to develop your own relationships in your home and also have new ones. But we will see you next week, same time, same place, with a new topic and guest. I hope to see you then, and keep those comments coming through. I do try and look at them, and we will see you next week. Have a good night. Assalamu alaikum. Take care. Bye-bye.